Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the We Love You Arsenal YouTube channel. Transfer window is done. It's slammed shut. As Elliot said in the Arsenal Vision podcast yesterday, I don't know why they can't just sort of shut it quietly instead of having to slam it every time. It's a bit obnoxious, but the window is slammed shut. We can't make any more signings, and there was a bit of a meltdown yesterday when we didn't sign anyone on deadline day. And we're going to discuss that because we thought, as we've been covering the transfers throughout the window, we'd do a little roundup review of the window and express our thoughts. So let's get straight into it. I've obviously got the two of the other deputy editors on the We Love You Arsenal site, Rob and Daniel. It's a YouTube video, so I'm not going to give them a full-in chance to introduce themselves or do any of that because it's not a podcast. But anyway, overall, my outlook on this window is very positive. We will get into some of the warts of it, but I think we've improved our starting 11 in two positions, and I guess you can sort of think of William Saliba as a new signing. So basically, we've made three signings who will contribute significantly this season. We've added one player who's brought in for rotation, a backup goalkeeper, and a prospect. So I'm going to start with Danny because he's had less airtime than Rob. Danny, talk to me about the incomings in general, the players that we did get in, and how you feel about those signings in general.
Yeah, so in general, I think this has been a sort of a weird transfer window and not really one that we're, like the way that this one went, we're not really used to because a lot of times we kind of like to procrastinate. We're like a uni student. We just hold off till the very final moments. But this time around, we just got our really important business, I think, done early. And while we still had more to do, I think that maybe getting a lot of that important business done so early is now casting a negative shadow on the rest of the window. Overall, though, I think the signings that we made were really logical, and I think that we covered a good amount of areas that needed covered. Elephant in the room is that there's two areas that we failed to make additions in. But with the signings that we made, and with the player profiles that we brought in, and also I think personality types of the players too, I'm really happy with what we have, and I think it's going to improve us a lot going into this next season. And I think that's obviously the main goal of a transfer window, is to improve your team. And I think there's no doubt about it that we have certainly done that this window.
Yeah, listen, we identified our main, most important target before the season ended last season, and we got him in, for what looks like a good price. And he could be transformative. Gabriel Jesus is a huge signing, one of the best signings of the summer. So the fact we were able to get that done, you can't look at this window as not a success in that aspect. We added Zinchenko, I think, has changed the way we play in terms of the build-up in deep areas. He in itself, I think, lessens the necessity of us signing a central midfielder, or did. So I think I'm less concerned about that as some people, because we're less reliant on Thomas Partey now because of Alexander Zinchenko. So those two signings were excellent. I'm really excited to see what Fabio Vieira can do. I think it's a smart signing, a guy with a lot of up. He'll have resale values. He's got a high ceiling. He could potentially develop into that left eight. He could be used on the right hand side. I think he's mainly going to be used as sort of Odegaard backup, and he'll play in the Europa League. Matt Turner, listen, we don't know as much about him. Daniel, you probably do. It's a backup goalkeeper. It's not going to matter hugely. And Marquinhos, bit of a punt. There's very little risk to that deal. He could become great. He could not necessarily, but his value's not going to go down. He'll eventually probably go for more than we bought him. And potentially loads more. Potentially plays a huge role. Who knows? Rob, talk to me about how you feel about on the incomings that we did manage to get done. Like the same question I asked Danny, basically.
I'm glad that we've carried on with sort of the consistent policy which we've been doing for the sort of last, I'd say for the last year now, really, that this policy has been in place where we're really being specific with who we're signing. We're not just signing anyone just because we need to fill a spot in the squad. That would have been very easy to do. I mean, we discussed potential options at the number 6 who, the club probably haven't been tracking, but would have made sense. And in a way, even though I would have appreciated someone coming in that sort of role that perhaps would have been a bit stopgappy, I also completely understand why the club are sticking with the current strategy, because it's been very effective. I'll second everything that you guys said on Jesus and Zinchenko. I think looking back in a few years, we'll look back at those acquisitions as game changing. And I think up until we've had this sort of mini injury crisis, I think you can look back out the window as one of the most successful that we've had in a very long time, comparable to last summer, arguably better, because obviously last summer was crucial in terms of the rebuild, but this is all about adding that quality now and finding ways to further improve this team, and we have clearly done that. I think we all knew heading into the summer that the striker signing was the most important one, and we got that done early. And we addressed issues in defence. We did address midfield. We have signed Fabio Vieira. He's a bit of an unknown entity at the moment, but supposed to be a very good player. And then, Marquinhos is an exciting position, and Matt Turner looks like an apt sort of understudy. Would have been nice to, from the outgoing perspective, to make a bit more money, of course, but I think that is something that's going to develop further along the line when we perhaps start to sell players we wouldn't ideally want to sell.
Yeah, before we get into some of the things we didn't do and maybe a few concerns we have there, I do want to touch on the outgoings, as you just mentioned there, because it is obviously a part of the transfer window. When you're assessing it, you have to take into account those. I think we ultimately got rid of every single player we wanted to, barring maybe Reece Nelson, but he got that injury, which made him pretty difficult to move on. And in the end, he could become an option for us, which is something I'm going to get onto and things we didn't do. But yeah, we got rid of pretty much everyone. I would have liked to have seen Cedric maybe move on, but I guess it makes sense to have him as extra depth this summer. I think we found some good loans for some of our young players, like Nuno going to Marseille is a really good loan. He could really excel there, and if he does, he could come back much better player or come back as a higher asset. We got, Charlie Bettino's got a good loan, Brooke Norton Coffey, some of those young players, good loans. Everyone's going to point to the very, very little money we brought in. I'm trying to think of players we got any money for. Bern Leno, he went to live to Fulham, was 9-10 million.
Torreira got like 8 million or something.
8 million. I look at it and think the damage was done far before this summer in terms of these outgoings. We allowed these players' values to diminish, and it became so clear we wanted to get rid of them. Unfortunately, the market in which they were going to, unless it was a Bern Leno going to Fulham, most of the players that we were looking to get rid of were linked with European clubs who just don't have the money at the moment. They can't pay the salaries that a lot of these players are on. And that is a result of incompetence in the past and not selling players when they're at their highest. Look at Maitland-Niles. We should have sold him to Wolves a couple of years ago. I think that you can't sell players when there's no market for them, or there's not a market for them that is capable of paying the wages and paying the transfer fees we're looking for. It's impossible. So I think it's harsh to blame Edu in that sense. And going into the future, we shouldn't really be in that position because we've got young players whose values are only going to go up. So yeah, that's how I look at it. I know some people are still a bit frustrated. Danny, do you have anything on those outgoings? Do you think we could have got more money in? Do you think, how do you look at it?
Honestly, no. I'll just piggyback off of what Rob was saying too earlier. Look, sometimes in order to profit, you have to sell assets that you don't exactly want to, because if you don't want to get rid of them, it's probably because they're a good player. And if they're a good player, that means somebody wants them. These guys that we're giving out, I'm not saying I don't rate Hector Bellerin. I'm not saying I don't rate Ainsley Maitland-Niles. Give me one sec. Watch out, Kitty. Watch out. Shit. Sorry.
Wonder what's
My
happening.
cat just got out. We're good.
Oh.
Sorry. Good live footage. Anyway, yeah, I'm not saying I don't rate those players, but nobody really is going to want to break the bank and take a huge risk on a Hector Bellerin or an Ainsley Maitland-Niles. I mean, why would they? I mean, we've shown on multiple occasions that they're not the best. I mean, maybe they're a good option off the bench, but realistically, they're not worth the risk.
I mean, they are good players, but
sure,
but they're on like just insane wages for the clubs that want them, and for the clubs where they'd be good. They're on too high wages. I mean, Bellerin's ended up going to Barcelona, so which feels if you told any Arsenal fan about 6 years ago Bellerin will go to Barcelona at 27, I think we'd all have gone, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can see that, but I don't think anyone could have anticipated the way in which it's happened.
No, and I mean, especially when you look at his loan to Betis, it went okay, but he didn't pull up trees or anything like that. Well, obviously, really happy for Bellerin, and then I think Ainsley Maitland-Niles got a really good move to Southampton too. I think that'll probably work out for him. I know that one's just a loan technically, but yeah, it's like the players like, for example, Smith Rowe. None of us want to lose Smith Rowe, but he's not getting a lot of game time at the moment. Obviously, it's still early days in the season. That could definitely change. But, if somebody else comes in and they're like, hey, we'll give you 50, 60 million for Emile Smith Rowe, we don't want to go through with it. But, I mean, come on, let's be honest.
What a smart club does. Look at what Brighton do. And then they reinvest smartly.
100%. And then who knows, maybe we could do a Liverpool and, sort of build a brand new team that becomes one of the best in the world. Obviously, that's, I think, pretty far in the future. And I think we have, some players that bigger sides would be, or richer sides, I should say, maybe not bigger, would be interested in. But I think that'll be a couple of years down the line. So, no, I don't think we really could have done any better with getting more money for the players that we sold. I just tend to agree with what Edu said, that it's kind of an investment to get rid of players on a free, because maybe a Bellerin, though he is a model professional, maybe an Ainsley Maitland-Niles, a Bernd Leno, maybe those guys weren't fully committed to the project because they knew they weren't going to be part of it for the long term.
Ultimately, we're better off without these players, but without a fee than we would be if they just stuck around. Like, we've got so much money off the wage bill. It's quite good. Nicolas Pepe, I like that loan. I think it's smart to get him on loan, put him out on loan this season, because if he has a good enough season in France, there will be more of a market for him next summer, and we can get more money for him. It makes sense. Rob, anything on the outgoings?
Yeah, I think Arsenal aren't really in the best selling position in general. Everyone knows what we're trying to do at the moment, and that is to slim down the squad in a sense and get that quality. And unfortunately, it always seems to be the way with Arsenal that clubs know that we're just desperate to get rid of these players, and as such, they're not interested in giving us good money for them because they don't need to. They know that we're going to give in to small demands. And, I think someone like Ainsley Maitland-Niles is a saleable asset. Definitely. He's come through the academy. He's played a lot of Premier League football. But, last season we weren't interested in having him at the club. He's he's got 2 years left now because we triggered an extension. But we're not in a great position to sell these players. It's just as simple as that. It's not like Manchester City's Deadwood, who are part of like a elite culture and title winning sort of club. These are guys who have contributed to Arsenal's mediocrity over the last however many years, half a decade. And as such, no, people know that we don't want them anymore. We're turning a new leaf. And this is really the last remaining of that crop of players.
The thing that I take most satisfaction from this window and the past few windows. It's the clear and coherent recruitment strategy. Look at some of the teams around us. Look at Chelsea. I'm sorry, but the way they've gone about their business this summer, dreadful. It's like they're playing career mode. It's just throwing money at their problems. I mean, Chelsea have always done that, but there's clearly been they didn't have like a coherent list strategy coming into the window, like a list in each position they wanted to strengthen, um, with very specific, qualities they're looking in certain players to fit the Tuchel system, the age profile, all that stuff. It was just sort of, oh, we need a centre mid. We'll just look around the market and find the biggest name, or Koulibaly, Sterling, Aubameyang, dreadful signing. As much as it's going to hurt seeing him in a Chelsea shirt, and it has done, it feels disgusting. It's a dreadful signing. Look at Man United this summer. No strategy there. And this feeds into the stuff we didn't do. And it was the same in January. We didn't go for striker because we had a long-term plan of getting Gabriel Jesus. And after we didn't get Vlahovic, we didn't feel the others on the market were the right player at that time. And just because maybe having a striker would have been good for the immediate short term, 6 months, we didn't do it because the right player wasn't on the market. The same thing happened in this window right at the end. Firstly, the central midfield position. I'm not as annoyed at that because I think if Partey and Elneny hadn't got injured, we wouldn't have, no one. I mean, there'd be a few people saying maybe it was a bit of a concern. We should have got more cover there, but most people would be saying very little right now. And then if they got injured next week, it'd be like, oh, we're fucked. Like, two players getting injured in one position can happen. And you can't necessarily prepare for that, I don't think. And I think the Douglas Luiz thing goes to what I was saying there about, and it's a theme throughout this window. We weren't willing to pay over the odds for players we just didn't feel like. And City do that. And City are a very well-run club. And you know what that does? It enhances your reputation as a buying club for future summers. Look at Manchester United. They will just go and pay over the odds. And it means clubs can, manipulate them into paying these insane fees because they know they'll pay it. We took a stance, said, Douglas Luiz, 25 million, anything over that for a player with a year left on his contract, very average Premier League player, it's not worth it. And it wasn't. And I'm glad we didn't do that as much as we may have needed a signing there and then. The club felt it's not worth paying that much. We don't necessarily know he's the player we want for the long term to fit the strategy. So I'm glad in that sense. But I am a bit worried that we didn't sign a winger. But I think there are options. People are acting like we have to play Saka in every Europa League game. We don't. We have Marquinhos, who is probably good enough in these Europa League group stage games. I think maybe in January we could go after someone. Reece Nelson, he's done it at that level before, even if he's not good enough for the Premier League. Vieira can play out there. Jesus can go out there. And Nketiah, who's been brilliant off the bench, can go down the middle. It's not the end of the world. Any concerns, Danny, and anything on that sort of the things we weren't able to do?
No, I mean, obviously some concerns with midfield and winger, but I totally agree with what you were saying about Douglas Luiz. When I first heard the rumor, I know a lot of people, including you, Alfie, were a little bit skeptical about it, which, by the way, I totally understand. I think if we could get him for maybe that 15 to 20 million pound, price point, that would maybe just be a good deal for us to get done, considering he has all that Premier League experience. And I don't mean to be nitpicky or anything, but 25 million, though it's just a few million more, just seems overpriced. 1 year left on his contract, like you said in the group chat, not like superb at anything really. It just would be a good squad player, and I think 25 is a bit steep. That 25 could have been spent on a Tielemans, for example. But I think we looked at the Tielemans situation, and Leicester were being difficult, and we were just like, look, dude, he's got a year left on his contract too. We'll just wait him out and we'll bring him in for free. There's no real, desperation from us in that regard. But yeah, I think we've been doing a lot better at that, Alfie. I think we've been doing a lot better with, being more confident in the transfer window and being sort of just not seeming desperate, because when you're desperate or when you come off as very stupid like Manchester United. I can't really call City stupid because I think they just basically have boundless finances, so they don't really give a shit. Same with
But
Chelsea.
even with their insane finances, they don't get conned into overpaying. Like they pull out of
Kukurea.
deals when it gets to high. Exactly, because they know in the future teams will look at that and just say, "Oh, well, they're just willing to pay whatever they want, whatever to get the player. Oh, we'll just add an extra 10 million and an extra 10 million." But if they pull out of deals, it shows they're not willing to do that, which is smart.
Good point. Yeah, good point. I think Manchester United then are the prime example of a team that just overpays for this Anthony guy or whatever. I just don't understand why the hell they're paying 100 million. I mean, that just seems absolutely bananas to me. But whatever. I think it's funny to watch them do that, and I like that we're going through these transfer windows with common sense. And like you were also touching on, Alfie, there's a January transfer window, and I think that bringing in somebody like a winger in particular, maybe a guy that the league don't quite understand yet, can actually really sort of be a feather in the hat for us and help us a lot because you look at Bukayo Saka and the season he's having. Look, the fact is Bukayo Saka is being double marked every single match. And it's because they expect him to do great things, understandably, because he's a great player. If you bring in, a Yeremy Pino, for example, in the January window, maybe then you're going to pay a little bit lower of a price because the contract's dwindling down. Obviously, teams don't want to give up players in the middle of the season, but they might be like, we could use some extra cash to get some things done in our January window. So I think that let's look at this mid-season transfer window and try to get something done in it. I mean, who knows? Maybe even a Tielemans or something can be done there too. I don't think all hope is lost. I think we had a good transfer window. I said this in my recent Fenton's Frolic. Don't let the pessimists get inside your head. We had a good transfer window. Just because we got it early doesn't mean we didn't get it done well.
Yeah, and you mentioned there, like with the January window, it's like we only have 11 more Premier League games until the January window. That might sound mental, but that shows you that it's not insane. Saka does not have to play 50 games this season. I think people are over egging that. There is like a little bit of concern in central midfield for the very short term because we've got quite a few games before Partey will even be back. And then El Neni, we don't know when he's going to be back. But when they return, we're fine again. It's like no one would be saying, as I said, no one would be saying that we should have bought a centre mid in. Well, if Partey or Neni got injured next week, it would be a very different outlook. I think we have enough depth to survive until January. It's after January when the Europa League games start getting harder and we all have to play similar teams in the Europa League and Premier League where we may need that winger, as you said, Daniel, or maybe even a Tielemans for extra depth. But I think until then, I think we should not overestimate the quality of the Europa League group stage. Zurich and Bodo Glimt should be comfortably beatable with someone like a Marquinhos playing. Rob, anything to add on all that before I ask for your overall ratings?
Yeah, I'm just going to say again that people do really foresee the next sort of transfer window being a bit of a weird one because it is going to come after a World Cup, and we all know what happens after a World Cup. Someone is very good, and someone signs that player for 50, 60 million pounds. And it could very well happen in January. So, yeah, I do think January is one to keep an eye on, and you're right, that's when the sort of better players in our squad are going to have to be playing on a more consistent basis. At the moment, we can really chop and change regularly with this group stage and the quality of our opposition. But until then, I think the squad is probably about right in terms of the depth there at the moment.
I'd agree. I'm going to quickly ask in maybe 10, 20 seconds for your ratings out of 10. I'll kick off mine. I'm going for an 8. I think if we'd added a winger, I'd go 9. If we'd added a winger and a midfielder, I'd go 10. But I think 8. I think it was pretty good. Daniel.
I'm gonna do a little bit of a cop out, and I'm gonna go 7.5. I think if we would have brought in a winger, that would have bumped me up to 8. Midfielder, maybe 9. I don't know what it would have taken to get a 10. I don't really give 10s, but yeah, I think we had a really good window though. Just not quite an 8 because I do think winger was really, really important going into this window. So maybe that would have actually bumped it up to a 9, just a winger alone. But 7.5 for me, I think that's a pretty, maybe even a 7.8. Who knows? I think it was a decent window, and we should be confident going into the season because we got a lot of good additions in.
Yeah, and as I said just there, I said 8. If it had been Douglas Luiz, I'm not sure I would have given a 9 because I think it had to be the right player. It's just not a player. Rob?
Yeah, I'm going to go for an 8 as well. I think that really the business that we have done is excellent. Signing 2 players of the caliber of Jesus and Zinchenko is just enough for me. Even if we just signed those 2, I think I probably would have been content with the business we'd done over the summer because they just have improved us so much, and that's what we needed. We wanted this team to go from sort of the potential to be good to genuinely very good. And it seems like we have done that with those 2.
Absolutely. Just remember, we're top of the league, guys. I'm not talking to you two necessarily, but people having a meltdown on Twitter because we didn't sign Douglas Luiz for 30 million. We're top of the league, and we've started great, and we're battering teams. We're playing some of the best football we've seen for years. We're on the up. I know it's going to get harder. It's going to get more congested, but yeah. Anyway, this has been the longest transfer video we've done all summer, which makes sense because we are rounding everything up. And it's been a great little discussion. Almost like a mini podcast. So yeah, subscribe to the We Love Your Arsenal transfer. We Love Your Arsenal YouTube channel. Just because the transfer window's done does not mean the content's gone. And we'll see you in whatever the next one is. Bye bye.